Hello, welcome to CinemAddicts bonus CinemAddicts episode. Greg, we've been doing this a long time.
Episode 2? I think
No,
it's
it's not
episode.
episode
I think
2.
it's episode 48. Episode 48. That's what it is.
49, Greg.
49. I'm sorry.
Come on,
really,
buddy.
Episode.
That means there's
it's
only
episode 49.
3 of these left after we finish off 1968, which is what we're doing here today. I'm Anderson. You know that because you listen to this and you're a Patreon member of the old program CinemAddicts. That's Greg Srisavasdi. He's a top Critics' Choice guy.
Can I still say just nanny? I just want to be a nanny, even though Claire's in first grade. I still consider myself a nanny. Is it an old job? Should I just quit that job of being a nanny, even though I don't take care of her during the week anymore?
Probably.
I feel so sad.
I feel like you can't use that title anymore, Greg, is the main thing.
Do you ever look at old baby photos from Atticus from 3 years? All the time.
It's so sad. It's like that person just doesn't exist anymore. And I love that person so much, that little thing. And it's just gone.
Don't you miss the carrying on your shoulder, all that stuff? And
I can still do that a little bit, but not nearly as much. Yeah. He's just changing every single day. His adult teeth are all coming in. It's like, stop it, dude. I yell at him every day. I'm like, would you just stop? I'm trying to stunt his growth. I'm trying to, cause some trauma so that he stops growing. That's not funny. I'm giving him like food without a nutritional value so that he just stops, he stunts his growth. That's not funny, Anderson. Come on. So yeah, today 68, we're going to be doing The Producers, which is a movie that I'm very well aware of but have never actually sat through, as well as The Boston Strangler.
I was almost mad at you, Anderson, for picking The Producers, and there's a huge reason why. And here it is. I looked at it on YouTube. I was going to purchase it, and it said 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Oh, that's
and
a
I
lie.
was beside myself. That's not a lie. It was 2 hours and 14 minutes. The Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane version and Uma Thurman. Can you believe that?
Why would you?
Glad I did not purchase it on YouTube. That version.
You know what? That's funny though. After watching Mel Brooks's 1968's The Producer, which says 1967 on IMDb, ignore that. For whatever reason, it was released for like a week in November of 1967 in Pittsburgh, which is strange. I didn't get to the bottom of that. I don't know why. So that officially made it a theatrical release of 67, but it was eligible for all the awards of the 1968 canon of films that came out, that cohort, if you can call it that. So I don't know why they released it in Pittsburgh. That's bizarre. Do you have any idea why?
I have no idea.
Anyhow, after I finished that screening, I did think like, wow, I feel like there was some more story there. This went by, everything happened pretty quickly and wrapped up fairly quickly. So I wonder what they did add. I don't wonder enough to want to go and watch that Matthew Broderick, Nathan Lane version, but I am curious.
Which is the other flip side. I was about to be mad at you because it's over 2 hours, whereas The Boston Strangler is basically 2 hours. I thought it was going to be a quick 90 minutes, and I apologize to you personally, Anderson, for
Greg, where you got to be?
running.
Where you got to be?
I mean, I got to do other things. I got games on my iPad I want to play. I got these match 3 games. Like I like match and farm games. Don't you play those on the iPad? So
I don't play any games, Greg. I stopped playing games like 3 years ago. I just cut it off cold turkey. I'm like, what are you doing? I'd find myself just like having a cigarette and playing a stupid racing game with like other teenagers. And I'm like, what are you doing with your life, dude? Stop it. It was just total escapism. And I'm like, there's so many other things you could be doing rather than this. So I just stopped. I don't play any games right now.
Okay. So look,
Well,
maybe it's a good idea. Maybe the 2 hours wasn't so bad for The Boston Strangler for you. We'll see. I don't know, which of these movies do you want to start off with?
Hey,
first?
if you were to take all of the screens that were on the screen at times during The Boston Strangler and make them their own screens and add time, it'd be like a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, and
there's so many.
That is funny, Anderson. I am just fearful about your take on that because we may come to loggerheads about the visual style of The Boston Strangler.
The multiple image. First time ever used in a major motion picture, Greg.
Yeah, and this
35% of the movie actually has a couple images going simultaneously on the same screen.
Now, here's the thing. What's good about The Boston Strangler is the good news as of this recording. It's available for streaming on Hulu, as well as people can see the recent version, the new version, Boston Strangler, starring Keira Knightley. So if you enjoy the Keira Knightley film, go possibly. Anderson, would you right off the top?
What role does she play in that?
She's a reporter who actually helps uncover the Boston Strangler. I'm going to cough for a second. Hold on. Wait, hold on. Yeah.
Who plays the Boston Strangler in that one?
Your buddy from, you're the guy you hang out with, the actor guy.
Buddy Revell?
Yeah. No. The guy from remember the Suicide Squad. Remember the guy with the circles and you were making fun and.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
David Dasmalchian.
Yep. He's the guy. He's the
Oh, he's a Strangler. Dude,
He's
he shouldn't
Albert
be mad at
DeSalvo.
me for saying that he plays creepier really well, because obviously he does.
Yeah.
Obviously he does. Tony
Yeah.
Curtis really wanted the role as the Boston Strangler, and the director said, no, you're not right for it. You're considered a pretty boy. And you know what old Tony Curtis did, old Blue Eyes did over there?
What'd he do?
He put on some makeup, he put on some prosthetics, and he had a bunch of mug shots taken of him, and then he sent them to the director, and the director did not recognize. He's like, "Ooh, this guy looks good. Who's this guy?" He did not recognize Tony Curtis in those mug shots that he had doctored up. So he's like, "All right, you know what? Maybe you're onto something."
Here's the thing about the Boston Strangler, which we're going to start off first. Hour and 56 minutes. It's directed by Richard Fleischer. Most people of this day and age do not know who Richard Fleischer is, but he's had a great career, a long career in cinema. This is one of his, I guess, I don't know if it's his best received movie, but it's one of his top movies as far as what he's known for. And I think one of the thing is that the Boston Strangler, based on the book by Gerald Frank, it's based on the Boston Strangler. And actually, there's a lot of interesting things about this movie. First of all, Anderson mentions all of the friggin' split screens and all these little first time ever used, and they're used a lot. And I'm sure, Anderson, you're thinking Greg is going probably, he's spasming when he's watching all this stuff, because I loved it because I'm a Brian De Palma fan. I'm wondering, Anderson, with all of these visual cues and design, did you find that off-putting for the year, and do you think it was even necessary?
I think it was a touch distracting at times. However, I really, really appreciated it and recognized that it was innovative for its time. I didn't realize it was the very first major motion picture to actually use it, but I really liked the way that he used it a lot of the time to give us the point of view, at times the actual POV, as well as just, the world of the Strangler and the victim simultaneously, so we could see both worlds. I liked some of the uses where some of the victims are found, one in particular where there's two women who evidently take care of this old woman, and they're coming home with the groceries, and we get the shot of them in the kitchen. Simultaneously, we have a shot of the woman with the broom, which was very racy for the time. I can't believe they got that past the censors, but we just have the shot of her legs. It's almost like a POV shot of the victim from the floor looking through her open legs. You just see, like, thighs up, nothing gratuitous, and there's a broom laying on the floor in between her legs, suggesting horrific things that happen with that broom. And then so we got that shot, which is a static shot, and then we got the two ladies that take care of this old woman in the kitchen, none the wiser, and then they come in and they open the door, and we get the real-time reaction, which I thought was really interesting. And I would imagine that at the time a lot of people were thinking, like, this is the future of cinema, we're going to be doing this all the time. Thankfully they didn't, but I think it really worked with the way that they used it in this film. However, they may have used it a little, might have leaned on it a little bit too much. I could tell that they liked their new toy, and they were playing with their new toy a little bit too much, maybe, if that makes sense.
Do you think that new toy, Anderson, could be still utilized in cinema today, or do you think it's antiquated? Like, I know years ago you're still not a big fan of the push-in, which I love. I love these antiquated methods. Do you think it was only good for its day and not good for today's cinema?
The one film that I saw recently, I think it was just last year, it was the official release, was Lux Eterna, Gaspar Noé.
Yeah.
Gaspar Noé. Still hate saying his name, Gaspar Noé. I will always hate saying Gaspar Noé, but that's the proper pronunciation. But he used it a lot in that movie, to the point of absolute distraction. Now, I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that?
No, I should see it after what you just said. I had no idea.
It's like watching two movies in one. You're seeing it. The movie is chaotic. It's about putting on a production, but it becomes even like just like fever pitch chaos with all the different moving parts working. And he usually kept it to only two, as was the case here. That rarely did they go more than two. But it's a lot of information to take in. There's also that Michael Figgis movie. What was it? Time Capsule? Time what was it? Time Code.
Time Code.
Yeah, never saw that, but
Very
that looked
good.
stressful. That looked stressful. I think that was his follow-up to Leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, that was when Figgis was a powerhouse in his day. Speaking of powerhouses, Anderson, we have Henry Fonda as John S. Bottomley. He's one of these government officials who is tasked with actually bringing all the counties of the area together, the forces and departments together, to actually organize a task force to capture the Boston Strangler. Okay, so that's one. And then also, along with Tony Curtis, there's George Kennedy, who plays one of the detectives. What's interesting is sort of maybe 25% of the movie starts off with George Kennedy trying to track down the Boston Strangler. And as the story progresses, then we move into sort of a centralized investigation and hunt for the Boston Strangler. What's interesting is Tony Curtis doesn't even appear until halfway throughout the movie. So
Yeah,
just
an
halfway when the
hour
movie's
in is when we finally see
hour
him.
in. So that's really interesting. So there's some really interesting stuff. There's some really good actors. You guys don't know who Murray Hamilton is, but if you see Murray Hamilton, you go, oh, I've seen this guy before in movies from the 60s and 70s. There's Sally Kellerman. Also, I don't know if you found this. Did you notice, Anderson, there was a actor who was in both films, both the producers and this movie, The Boston Strangler. Do you know who that actor is?
I do not.
Bill Hickey.
Oh,
Bill Hickey plays one of the people who might be the Boston Strangler. It's not a spoiler because the Boston Strangler is played by Tony Curtis. Bill Hickey plays one of the guys who's really, his fetish is, I think, women's kerchiefs. Remember the handkerchief guy? And he's
yes.
stringing these handkerchiefs together.
Yes,
And he's
he
saying,
was
no,
troubled.
don't. He was
That guy
troubled.
was troubled. Yeah. He would lash, he would flog himself.
Yes, that's William Hickey, best known for Prizzi's Honor. He was also a drama teacher, and William Hickey is also in The Producers. He is the bar patron at the end of the movie where they give him drinks to buy at the end.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can see that now. I did not
Bill
recognize him. Greg, good pull. Good pull.
No.
Speaking of a couple things here, another through line with these two movies being similar. Old ladies in the Boston Strangler, they don't fare too well, and they are the victims, and in the producers, they're not the victims. They're kind of the predators in a sense, even though they're being victimized for their money, but they're very sexually aggressive with old Zero over there.
And I think most of these ladies know that they're just giving money for his services, not for the production, right? As far as the producers, right?
They're giving their sexual getting their sexual favors from him for 100% of the film proceeds at times, or 50%, as it were. And then another thing we should bring up about a Boston Strangler is Robert Fleischer, the director. He's probably best known for Soylent Green. And,
yes, there are people.
Tora, which I have not seen yet. That's a long one. As well as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which we covered for this here feed. So, right?
Yeah, and Mr. Majestic and Mandingo. He was a big time prolific director. In fact, Anderson, there's a book called Just Tell Me When to Cry. I actually picked it up. About
like a Greg book.
Yes, it is a Greg book because you have John Wayne in it, Kirk Douglas, Robert Mitchum, Charlton Heston. We mentioned Soylent Green with Charlton Heston. Orson Welles? What do these actors have in common? They all work with Richard Fleischer, and Fleischer talks about it in his book Autobio, Just Tell Me When to Cry, which I picked up over a year ago at a used bookstore, just on a whim, Anderson.
Yeah, how many autobiographies has he written?
Oh, Richard Fleischer, just that one. Just Tell Me When to Cry, and what. He only devoted 2 or 3 pages to this movie, and which begs the question, Anderson, do you think this movie at its time, it was maybe groundbreaking, especially for the visual stuff? Do you think movies like Zodiac were influenced by the Boston Strangler, or do you think it's a movie that's just obscure and really?
I think it probably, because it was kind of at the advent of exploring the idea of serial killers and what their makeup and their psyche and character studies of those wretched few that walk amongst us, right? But I think what it led to more than anything else, I couldn't help but think as watching this, is a template for Law and Order. I mean, this felt like a 2-hour early Law and Order episode. I mean, the formula is there, where it's a couple detectives, bad things are happening, they have a case to solve, and they're going down, meeting all of these undesirables in our society that may be suspects, may be their guy, but turn out not to be guys. So they're guys. So it's like a bunch of dead ends, but along the way you get a bunch of interviews, a bunch of police shakedowns, and you see like little snippets of these undesirables' lives. And that's pretty much what Law and Order is, from what I gather. I don't know if I've ever actually sat down and watched an entire episode, but I think that's what it is. And I know in casting for groupers, I came across a lot of headshots and credits that from people who had been in Law and Order. because it's a great spot for actors to, you know, get a role, early roles in their career. They can play a perp, right? They can play a suspect, and they just do the whole, like, you know, question answer thing, and like, oh, it wasn't me, I'm telling you, I was over here with my mom at that time. And that's what this movie definitely was. It definitely felt Law and Order.
Okay, a little side note before we get into our ratings or
All the
reviews of this.
perverts, so many
All,
perverts in here.
speaking of perverts, Anderson, there was this acclaimed British writer and playwright named Terence Rattigan. He is best known, I guess, some of his movies that are best known here is like The Winslow Boy. He did The Winslow Boy. He did the Browning version. These are works that he actually had as plays. They eventually turned into movies. You mentioned Mike Figgis. Mike Figgis directed, I just realized this, Mike Figgis directed a version of the Browning version, I think some 20 years ago, again, based on the work of Terence Rattigan. Terence Rattigan was one of the writers who was hired to actually do this movie. And I learned this from the book. And Richard Fleischer, his only anecdote from the thing is he and Gerald Frank, the writer, the author, and a producer, they met Terence Rattigan at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And during the meet and greet, Terence Rattigan, the only question he asked Gerald Frank, again, the expert on the Boston Strangler, the author, he kept asking Gerald, hey, Gerald, do you know how big Albert DeSalvo's penis was? Was it really, really big? Was
What
it like,
in the world?
was it really,
That's
was
the
Albert
real
DeSalvo?
Boston Strangler. That's
Yes,
that's the actual
yes.
Boston Strangler.
Yes, I need to know if his penis was really, really big.
Why
Can
would
you
he
just tell
ask
me?
these questions?
Exactly. And Richard Fleischer is just aghast at the whole thing because that's the only real question that Terence Rattigan asked during the meet. So that was a weird meet. And then I guess maybe a couple of weeks later, who knows how much longer, he submitted his treatment for the movie, and Fleischer and everyone else looked at Rattigan's treatment. And remember, Rattigan is a celebrated writer, and they thought it was pure trash. It was pure trash, and Rattigan knew it was trash, and he basically said, hey, you guys need a real writer to do this. I need to be free creatively. This feels like more of a linear writer that you need. I'm gone. And then Fleischer said, okay, well, at least he admitted to not being the right writer for this, but he still kept the check. He still kept the money he made for the treatment. So that's like the Rattigan little anecdote for the Boston Strangler. That said, Anderson, is the Boston Strangler worth a watch? I think the big barrier. Oh, really?
100%. Yeah.
Can I say there's a barrier to entry? The last 5 or 6 minutes, there's a tour de force performance from Tony Curtis that I think it's just a sort of a solo work that's like, wow, what is this about? But anyway, so yeah, your overall
Why
review.
is that a barrier to entry?
I don't know. Well, I think a lot of this movie is very showy. And I think people who just want a straight up hardcore, there's some really interesting flashes, like Tony Curtis in a room. It's like, seems like a one-man play for about 5 or 6 minutes with him in a room. I don't want to get into too much details about it, but until the spoilers, but I thought that was great. But I don't know, maybe some people might think it's boring. I don't know. I was thinking maybe you might think it's like, wow, it's too flashy, but your thoughts.
No,
Okay, cool.
I liked it, and for the reasons that we stated, you know, it obviously led to other things, and it was probably at the time fairly very, very unique and tawdry, and it definitely pushed the boundaries, as did the producers. I think the producers, strangely enough, is probably the more offensive of the two films, especially at the time when they came out in '68. I think that there was more backlash against the producers, but this one, I mean, with all like the pervs that they were talking to and looking at, and like the foot fetish guy, and the broom that I mentioned earlier, and there was some, it is dated in the sense that I feel like they got multiple personality completely wrong, which comes up in this.
Right.
And the ESP thing was kind of, it could have been just completely cut out unless that's part of the actual story.
And they liberally use a word that rhymes with maggot, but I mean, that's something
dude,
that,
yeah. I mean, in both films, the gays did not do too well at all. That's another through line. It was brutal the way that they talked about and just illustrated gay people at the time as though, like, well, he's gay, so like we gotta see if he's murdering these women because he's obviously a perv, right?
Right.
Here's another funny line. This is from a film from 1968. Remember, Boston Strangler came out in 1968. It means it was probably written in 66, 67.
Right.
And here's a line in the movie. Police brutality, we don't do that anymore. Like, as though like they had cleaned up their ways and were no longer doing police brutality, or weren't supposed to, as long ago as 1968 or 67, 66, whenever this was written. And it's funny because I mean, we're right there. We're still right there. I mean, I could see a cop in a TV show today or a movie today saying police brutality, we don't do that anymore, and it would be relevant and timely. And this is 40,
It's weird.
45 years ago.
Yeah, that
Huh?
is so funny. I was called to attention with that line, but yeah, really funny line in the Boston Strangler. Yeah, I
Here's
would
a
give
quick.
this. Oh,
Go ahead. No.
I would give this movie 4 out of 5. I don't know what you would give it
Well, you're
as
a
far as
4-star, Greg. Yeah.
a 4-star.
Yeah.
Greg, yeah,
This is a 4-star movie for sure.
sorry, cool.
Possibly approaching 4.5 stars just because of its relevance, I think. And I was never bored. It's interesting. You would think that. And I did not dislike the split screens. Which is also interesting that you would think that I'd have a problem with that. I do have a question though, and I'm wondering if you have an answer here. And it's every now and again a movie. This is a fairly tight movie, despite the fact that it's 2 hours long. But there's not a whole lot of fat. I feel like they could have cut out the ESP stuff, unless that actually was part of the actual story. Like I said, however, in the actual true life event, he did confess to the murders, and they don't have him doing that in the movie for whatever reason, which is strange to me. But there is a scene that could have been cut unless I'm missing something, and it did have relevance, and that's where we're watching him driving, looking for a parking spot because he's going to go, hit his next victim. We should say also that the Boston Strangler, what's his real name?
Albert DeSalvo.
Albert, worked like as a fix-it guy. So he had access to a lot of people's buildings, probably where he got the idea to begin with. And he also had alibis where he'd be able to, leave work to go on jobs and quickly do a little raping and killing and then get back to work and be like, oh, I was on the clock. But there's one scene where he's driving the streets of Boston looking for a parking spot. He sees one. He does that thing where he passes it. It's on the street parking, and he's about to back into it and do the parallel parking. And a little Volkswagen Bug drives in right behind him and takes the spot from him, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like, and he doesn't even really react, and then he just keeps driving. And they had to set up cameras. That was a big setup. They had multiple angles. Why did they include that? And why did they shoot that? Was it just to show that like he's not a hothead? He doesn't fly off the handle when people do dickish things, but he's a monster regardless. Like, what was the point of that?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Maybe maybe because they're just trying to show that he's a average normal guy until in that split personality situation. Maybe so.
I thought for sure he was going to come back around and like maybe like he couldn't kill someone because of that, and they narrowly missed their fate. But it didn't. And I know from production standpoint, like that was not an easy thing to, the camera too, if you recall, was like, I think they had a crane in the middle of the street. They had to shut the whole street down probably to get that shot. It's bizarre. I did not, and they didn't even make a thing of it. It was just like it was like a scene. They didn't even really show his reaction to him getting screwed over with the parking spot.
I have no idea. Yeah, I'm speaking of curious. I'm curious why this movie doesn't get a lot more, just attention or maybe even love, because like you said, there's some really interesting visual techniques behind this movie for its time, and the acting was good, and it's a solid film. You gave it 4 stars. I'm giving it 4. You said 4 stars with an uptick. So do we feel the same way about?
Wait.
Oh, yes, sir.
About the producers. We'll get to the producers in a second. We got to do our quick little let's see what else is big and what people were at. Boston Strangler does not get its due today, nor did it really get its due back then. Here's the top 10 grossing films of 1968. I believe this is just domestic. So here's how they did in the United States. This is an American podcast, so we'll leave it at that. Number 10 was The Green Berets, came in with $9.7 million. The Lion in Winter, with over $10 million. Yours, Mine, and Ours came in with 11.5 million. Romeo and Juliet. Brian.
Wow.
I mean, Greg. Gee, Brian.
I haven't seen these movies since I was a kid. A lot of these movies. So
you know what's funny? What all 4 of those movies have in common?
What?
They have not been seen by me. Which is okay. I think it's okay. Here we go. Now I've seen all of these. Planet of the Apes tied with Rosemary's Baby for the 6th spot with $15 million. Oliver came in with 16.8. Bullet, the highly overrated Bullet, came in with $19 million. I watched Bullet. I did not like Bullet. I cannot wait for Bullet to end.
Oh, wow.
It's some great car chase scenes, some great muscle cars and whatnot. But for the most part, I was just like, what is this story? Who is this guy? I hate the characters. I hate it. I just did not like anything about that Bullet. What do you think about Bullet?
I haven't seen it since
4
I was
stars.
a kid. No, right. I haven't seen it since as a kid. Again, I think who directed that? Was that Peckinpah? But some really interesting just like chase scene. That's all I remember. And I hear the movie is just built on that chase scene and nothing else. So really nothing.
Peter
else.
Yates.
Oh, Peter Yates. Oh, Peter. I'm so old, Anderson. I remember interviewing Peter Yates way back in the day, sir.
Could have used a Peck and Paw or a Freakin'. I think it would be much better if it was either one of those. The Odd Couple came in number 3 with $20 million. A movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Do you like that, Anderson?
What is this? I thought that was the highest grossing film. I think that this is the highest grosser over a stretch because it played for like 3 years. 2001: The Space Odyssey played for 3-4 years. So I think ultimately it made more in the theaters than these other films did. The number 1 did, which is Funny Girl with 24.9 million. I think 2001 outperformed it ultimately, but not in the calendar year of 1968. So Funny Girl was the number 1, which Babs, Barbra Streisand. I like Funny Girl. It's fine.
Yeah, I like Babs. I saw Yentl in the theaters and I liked it way back in the day in 1982.
Greg, these microphones are on.
So, okay.
Yentl.
I apologize for that.
Yentl.
I like Yentl. I'm a Yentl guy. So look, here's the thing. Can I mention the actors before we get into the producers? As far as the actors from 1968 who won, Best Actor went to Rod Steiger in The Heat of the Night. If I recall, Anderson, you are a fan of In the Heat of the Night.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
They call me Mr. Tibbs. Actor in a supporting role, that was the aforementioned George Kennedy, but not for our film, The Boston Strangler. He won that for Cool Hand Luke. Are you a fan of Cool Hand Luke, Anderson?
I am a fan of Cool Hand Luke.
Very.
You know
very
why
good.
he got arrested, Greg? You know what brought him into jail?
No.
Why Luke had to go to jail?
No.
He was it was the most random thing ever. He was dismantling parking meters, taking them off their heads, I guess for the money.
I remember that. That was a flashback sequence. That was very, very cool. In the middle of the night. Yeah, that was very cool. Yeah. Best actress was Katharine Hepburn. Guess who's coming to dinner? Anderson's favorite performance from Katharine Hepburn, of course, was, I remember, the African Queen. Actress I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Actress in a supporting role went to Estelle Parsons for Bonnie and Clyde. I'll get to the Best Picture, Director, and Foreign Language Film. That's when it was called Foreign Language Film later on the podcast.
Don't forget.
I will not forget, and we're going to get the birthdays as well. And Anderson, the producers, yes, Mel Brooks. Have you ever met Mel Brooks? Did he ever come on Loveline? Did you ever meet him in your dealings in the industry over the years?
No, unfortunately I have not, because I think that I would really enjoy Mel Brooks's company.
That
was a weird sentence.
Oh, no, not a weird sentence. I interviewed Mel Brooks years ago for a movie called Robin Hood Men in Tights. It was a TV interview, only like a 3 to 40 minute slot. Nicest guy in the world.
3 to 4 minute slot?
Yeah, 3 to 4 minute slot, TV slot. Really enjoyed his company. Carrie Elways was also cool, but love Mel Brooks. That said, the producers, starring Zero Mostel, Gene Wilder. We all know the plot line. There's Gene Wilder's an accountant. Zero Mostel is the guy who seduces women, older women, elderly women for their money.
He's desperate.
He tries to raise money for Broadway productions or off-Broadway productions that unfortunately never really hit the big time. And he's sort of a failed producer. But the premise of this is because he comes up with the idea, indirectly suggested by the accountant played by Gene Wilder, to mount a production, get a lot of money, like up to $1 million, raise $1 million, and actually have that production, which is going, I forgot what the production is called, Springtime for Hitler, have that production fail the first night and then recoup the losses, turn those losses into a big profit. That's the premise of The Producers, directed by Mel Brooks. Anderson, it's an iconic film. What can we say about this movie? What can you say about this movie? Was it as good as it was made out to be?
Some severe overacting, like severe overacting.
No, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me.
As is the case with pretty much every Mel Brooks
okay, fair
picture I've ever seen. That's kind
fair.
of his style.
Do you like that style? Do you like that style?
No, I do not.
No, the opening moment where Gene Wilder, as the accountant, is going to look at the books and he gets really, well, I talk about spastic. He's stressed about his blue blanket. That is an iconic scene, and I love it so much. That said, Anderson, you probably are on the other side. You thought it was too much when he's saying, my blue blanket, my blue blanket.
That whole opening scene, I like the opening credits with the freeze frames, and it opens up with a bang. I thought that the file that I was watching was like a bootleg copy or something. They missed the opening title sequence because it opens up with Zero, pushing an old lady out of his out of his office because he had another one coming in, and it starts off with a bang, and then the opening title sequences was fun with the freeze frames and whatnot, but then it gets to the point where it's Zero and Bloom hanging out. It's Zero and Wilder hanging out, and they are trying to outact each other and go over the top of each other. It seems like each of them are like trying to like mount the hill and summit the overacting hill simultaneously, and it was just way too much. And it's like I know this is supposed to be funny, but this is how I feel with pretty much every Mel Brooks movie I've ever seen. I'm like, I understand that some people think this is funny. I just can't access it. Lots of people find it very amusing, and I just don't. I don't know if I laughed one time. That said, Springtime for Hitler is an earworm. I can't stop whistling it and singing it. It's not the first time I've heard it.
Sure.
I think they did this with Mel Brooks, I think, on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I could be wrong, but that was the most that's how I became most aware of the producer's plot line was they did it on Curb Your Enthusiasm, a very similar take. I think that they're actually producing the producers, and Larry David was involved somehow. Anyhow, I liked the second act a lot. The first act was just like pulling teeth for me. It was like, it's confusing too, Greg, because I'll watch this in a vacuum. I'd just be like, it's not for me, whatever, it's a particular brand of comedy. But the fact that I know that this is in so many people's wheelhouse, and they just absolutely love Mel Brooks's work. Like I said, I think Mel Brooks is probably, I know he's a genius. He's a wordsmith, and he's probably, from what I've heard, he's a fantastic human being. I just do not like what he produces if it's not called The Elephant Man.
Oh, very good. Very good. And speaking of pulls, great pull on The Elephant Man with Mel Brooks. He was a great producer. He also produced To Be or Not to Be, which netted him an Oscar nomination with his late wife. I forgot. What was the name of the late wife? Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate. We mentioned The Graduate. What is her name? I got to look her up in a second. But speaking
look her up, because I was actually just looking at
Anne Bancroft.
Anne Bancroft. I was just looking at this poster, and it was brought to my attention. What we're talking about is the remake of To Be or Not to Be. The poster of that, Anne Bancroft's name is in brackets on the poster. And I was talking to somebody else about it who brought it to my attention, and both of us were trying to figure out, it must be an inside joke, but to who and what's it mean?
Yeah, that is weird. That is very weird.
Her name, it says Mel Brooks, and then it says Anne Bancroft, but it's like got brackets on either side of it. You never see that on a poster. I've never seen it ever. And what is it? Anyways, I just saw the original To Be or Not to Be. I think I talked about it with you guys.
No, you didn't. You didn't. But you worth it?
It's good.
Should I see it? Okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good. To Be or Not to Be.
I believe that's Ernst Lubitsch. And then all I remember from to Be or Not to Be, you're talking about Anne Bancroft in brackets. The reason why I didn't see it was Siskel and Ebert. They had a little special on At the Movies. They said movies from this year, nominations that don't deserve it. And they mentioned Anne Bancroft from To Be or Not to Be. I was scarred from that episode from back in '82, and I still haven't seen either version of To Be or Not to Be.
Worse than Brian is with Rotten Tomatoes with the old Siskel and Ebert. If they say it's not worth it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to check it out then, because my taste lines up precisely with yours.
It leaves a horrible impression in me, and I was scarred. Maybe one of these days I'll rip open the wound and watch To Be or Not to Be. Speaking of performances, memories, etc., Dick Shawn also plays a performer in this movie as LSD. He has a very LSD, sort of a Jim Morrison type. There's also Kenneth Mars playing this guy named Franz Liebkind. He loves Hitler. He loves Germany. He loves Nazis. But more than that, he loves his pigeons on the roof, on the stoop.
Another overactor.
Another overactor. And then finally, there's Christopher Hewitt plays Roger Debris. He is the director of Springtime for Hitler. You might know
another gay guy who doesn't fare well.
Right.
The gays, I don't know if the gays fared any better than the Nazis in this movie.
No, they did not.
My God.
Thankfully, things have progressed in cinema on a social level, on a humanistic level.
What's weird, Greg, is like Hollywood has always had so many creative people, and so many creative people happen to be gay, and so many gay people have been in Hollywood and working in Hollywood, and they were, I guess it was what they thought the public was demanding was like homophobic jokes and whatnot. It's
very, very sad. But Christopher Hewitt as that director, you might know him, Anderson. Maybe it's in our generation. Do you remember Christopher Hewitt as Mr. Belvedere? He was Mr. Belvedere.
Yes, I do, of course.
Yes, you do. So, anyways, producers, I really enjoyed it. My only complaint was, you didn't love the opening act. I thought the opening act was the best part of the movie. So you and I are completely on different sides. And then the rest of the movie was still very good. This 4-star Greg, I'm still giving this movie 88. It's only 88 minutes. I'm giving it straight solid 4 stars. Not as classic as I remembered it to be, but still a very, very good movie. Anderson, I'm wondering if you're even just giving this a 3-star rating.
It's 3 stars. It's
Okay.
and I do 3 stars as though it's right down the middle. Like some people are going to love it, some people are going to be like me. For me, it's I if it wasn't for Dick Shawn as LSD, I really enjoyed all that. What much like the play. I did not like the first act of the movie or even the first act of the play, even though that Springtime for Hitler, it was fine. It started to turn the corner a little bit for me once the play actually, comes on screen and they've produced the play and the play is being performed in front of a live audience. The first act where everyone's getting really upset and people are walking out and whatnot, I was still kind of like, yeah, this is not for me. But then once LSD comes on stage and he's doing his Hitler and the audience is reacting to it, I was reacting to it as well. I wasn't, falling off my chair laughing, but I really did enjoy what Dick Shawn did with LSD, and it was very of the time, and it was very beatniky, right? And like Jim Morrison, like you say, and he's talented too, and it just did not fit there at all, and it made it very entertaining. And thank God for Dick Shawn. If it wasn't for his performance, this movie would have probably never turned a corner. I did like the premise. I did, like the inevitable, obligatory failure to fail that was coming, and waiting for the reaction and to see how they would react. But that kind of, it wasn't satisfying either way. It is what it is. I'm still like I said, if I watch this in a vacuum, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's not, I don't, not for me. But I'm just always I feel lonely when watching movies like this, knowing that so many people love it. And it's like, what am I missing?
Gene Wilder, from our generation, Anderson, was considered a huge star. Can I venture the guess that you were not a huge Gene Wilder fan because his style of comedy was not for you?
He's not this over the top in other things. You
like
have to admit
Silver
that.
Streak, Stir Crazy.
I grew up watching Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, like on a loop. I watched those movies a lot with Richard Pryor growing up as a kid.
Okay.
I really liked him in those. I was really, really sad when he died. But this is him doing something that Mel Brooks obviously responds to and his audience responds to, which is just absolute hamming it up and going nuts. Speaking of which, couple more things on this one before we move on. Dustin Hoffman, who was nobody at the time, but he knew Mel Brooks. They were neighbors, I guess. He was initially offered the role as Bloom, which is ultimately went to Gene Wilder, because Dustin Hoffman was going to do it. Like, it was like a verbal agreement, and then he said, "Hey, just there's a chance that I might be cast in this little movie, so I'm up for a callback." Mel Brooks is like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. You're not going to get it. So you'll be my Bloom." And Hoffman said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go to the callback anyways, just to make sure you're right." And he ended up getting the part in The Graduate, so he could not take the role as Bloom. It'd be interesting to see. I can't picture Hoffman overacting as much as was required for this role. And then also, what else did I want to say about this? The writing was, because Mel Brooks had a really hard time figuring out whether he took a lot of heat when this movie, to hear him tell, like, every rabbi in New York wrote him an angry letter saying, how dare you with this movie? And his response was, "Hey, I had to get even with Hitler." I don't think this movie gets even with Hitler. I think that's a misstep to say, even suggest something like that if you're joking. But his whole aim obviously was to get people to laugh at Hitler. And I think he did that with this movie.
He definitely did that.
And he was trying to figure out if it was going to be a play within a play or a play within a movie, or a book perhaps. And he actually even almost made it a book at one point, but then realized that he was going to make it a book, but he realized there was just way too much dialogue. And he based it on when he was a kid. He was 16 years old. He worked for a theatrical producer who was doing this, who was funding his plays by sleeping with rich older widows. So it comes from a real life story. And then finally, because you brought up old Ebert earlier, one of the first things that I read about this movie, and it's on the IMDb trivia, was Roger Ebert recounted how he was in an elevator with Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft in New York after the film premiered, and a woman got on the elevator, recognized Mel Brooks, and said, "I have to tell you, Mr. Brooks, that your movie is vulgar." And Brooks replied, "Lady, it rose below vulgarity." Like, that kind of, like, magical wording it's just great. I just don't know if it translates for me in his films. It rose below vulgarity is such a perfect line.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if you did a rewatch of stuff like Silent Movie or High Anxiety, Young Frankenstein, History of the World Part One.
Never seen some of those. Like Spaceballs.
knows?
I can't stand it. I can't stand Spaceballs.
Right. But who knows? Maybe some of his other work might work for you. Just like that anecdote in the elevator. Now, since my iPad is at 6%, before we get to birthdays and whatnot, let me just say my fault. That's my fault. For the Oscars, to wrap up my Oscar segment.
I could tell you were distracted.
I'm not distracted. Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award went that year to, the reason why I'm saying Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award in 1968 went to one of my favorite filmmakers. No, it's not Brian De Palma. The winner is Alfred Hitchcock that year. Foreign language film went to Closely Watched Trains from Czechoslovakia, which I've been meaning to see. I hear so many good things about Closely Watched Trains. Speaking of The Graduate, Mike Nichols won for Best Directing for The Graduate. And finally, Best Picture went to, or did I say actress? What won Best Picture? Was it The Graduate? It wasn't The Graduate. It was Best Music Song. Best Picture went to In the Heat of the Night. Producer Walter Mirisch. So
they call me Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
You know what else is of note for the 1968 Academy Award, like 1969 Academy Awards for the 1968 films is it's when Stanley Kubrick won his one and only Academy Award.
Oh, really?
I think he won.
Barely.
I think he won. Maybe he didn't win. Never mind. I don't think he won. Anyways, he was nominated. He may have won. Maybe he won. But it was for best special effects. Because he was such a taskmaster. He actually was he was credited as the special effects master for 2001.
Okay,
as far I think he won. I think he won.
Yeah,
of course he won. I mean, what's going to beat special effects in 1968 when you got the 2001 over there? Won one Oscar. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just looked this up last night too, and winner best effects, special visual effects, 2001, Space Odyssey, 1968. Stanley Kubrick was not present at the award ceremony.
Yeah. As far as before we get to spoilers, you got to wrap up with birthdays, Anderson. Do we have birthdays?
Burt Lancaster accepted the award on his behalf. Get out of here, Burt. Come on, get.
I love Burt. I love me some Burt Lancaster.
Because of the presenters, Diane Carroll and Burt Lancaster just happened to be the presenters. So it's not like Kubi said, hey, Burt, can you do me a favor? Okay, cool. All right, good.
Burt Lancaster lived and died in Century City, California, my favorite city in all of Los Angeles. Anderson.
That's your favorite city?
I'm a city slicker. If I was a rich man, which I'm not, I would be in one of those sky rises where no nature does not touch any part of my existence. Just behind the mirrors, Anderson, and
like by the MGM tower.
Right, you're right. You're right next to Cedars. You got all the wonderful Jewish delis there, and you have all the great eateries and a lot of other places. So you got Olympic Boulevard. You're right next to Koreatown with that. Nothing better.
Okay, sorry. A picture has been painted.
So, okay, as far as birthdays go, I think for spoilers, there's really it's nothing spoiler worthy for either episode with the producers. I mean, really, we can talk about it for a couple seconds and what we thought about the ending in a few after the birthdays, or
yeah, you want me to do birthdays real quick?
Yeah, you can do birthdays, and we'll do a quick spoiler talk.
All right, these are people that were born in 1968. Greg, 1968, and there's a lot of them, and this makes me feel good to know that people that I still kind of think of as fairly young adults, or not young adults, but like young middle-aged adults, are older than I am by a number of years. So I like this. Cuba Gooding Jr., who I ran into at a Vegas in a Vegas bathroom once. He was singing. He was having a good time. Cuba Gooding Jr., born in 1968, as well as Eric Bana. Look at that. Joey Lauren Adams. Where'd you go, Joey Lauren Adams? I always call her Joey Lawrence.
You used to talk to her a little bit.
What's that?
Yeah, you've talked to her before, I think.
I don't think so. Have I?
Yeah. Didn't you tell me that you talked to Joey Lauren Adams before?
I don't remember that, but perhaps.
Anderson.
Talked to a lot of people. I don't remember.
You told me one time. I remember. It's an anecdote. You said she used to live near you. Don't you remember?
Did she?
Yeah.
I'm kind of remembering this.
Yes, remember you're
like when walking dogs or something.
Yeah. You were, and you told me, hey, one of your, remember the domicile you were near Tampa. It was near at that whole area. You had a domicile for a couple of years.
Right. I totally forgot that. Like she lived right. Oh my God, she lived right there.
She lived right there.
He lived right, like almost across the street from me.
Thank you. I'm just telling you a story. One in the world. I'm telling you a story that you told me several years back.
Where has she been? Either way, and she
Don't
moved
ask
out of that
me.
house. shortly
Okay.
after. Wow, I completely forgot all of it.
There you
Robert
go.
Rodriguez, also born in 1968. Casper Van Dien. You guys were just talking about it, weren't you? In
Yeah.
the movie you saw recently on you're covering on CinemAddicts.
Yes, daughter. Nice. Very good. Very good, Paul.
Lucy Lawless, born in 1968. She was uncredited, an uncredited voice on a PA system for high school in a movie that I just recently saw called Ginger Snaps.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Anthony Michael Hall, 1968. Would you look at that? Ashley Judd, 1968. Amy Ryan, Aaron Eckhart, who you're also just talking about recently. Jim Caviezel, Patricia Arquette, Molly Ringwald. These are all big names. Gillian Anderson, 68. Billy Crudup, 1968. I just saw Rudderless with Billy Crudup, and he was fantastic. Fantastic movie, that Rudderless. You ever see Rudderless?
Nice little pick me up of a movie, right?
Nope, no, it was not that. Parker Posey was born in 1968. Where are you gone, Parker? Maybe I should cast Parker Posey in my independent movie just to let everyone know it's independent.
No, yeah, because she was an independent it girl for quite a while over in Sundance.
Hugh Jackman, Naomi Watts, Owen Wilson, Daniel Craig, 1968. Kelly Hu, 1968. Josh Brolin, Sam Rockwell, Michael Stuhlberg, Lucy Liu, Pauly Shore,
and who?
Jerry Ryan. Jerry Ryan.
Pauly Shore showed up to one of my junkets at the Biodome junket in his robe. Can you? He did it for comedy. What do you think? Do you think that's
very funny? Bet it got a lot of yucks.
A lot of yucks.
Aronofsky's casting him in a movie called The Worm that's going to come out in a couple of years from now. He's probably going to win an Oscar. He's a very skinny man.
Very good. When we go, is that almost done with birthdays? Because I'm gonna
very
do a little
close. I got the biggest guys at the end here. Jerry Ryan. I just said Will Smith, Gregor, Guy Ritchie, Timothy Oliphant, and finally Brendan Fraser.
Oh, Brendan. Oh, the winner from The Whale. We love The Whale. You know what we also love? I also mentioned the 1968 Oscars. I forgot to mention the real Oscars that I should have covered, which was 1969, the year after 1968. 1969 Oscar winners, Cliff Robertson for Charlie. My fault. The actor in a supporting role.
Why do you have to let people know that 1969 comes after 1968?
Because I was covering 1968. Actually, I should have been covering 1969. Actor in a supporting role, Jack Albertson. Remember Jack Albertson? He was in The Subject Was Roses.
Actress, wait a minute. Wait, all the Academy Awards you did were for the wrong year.
I'm silver streaking through 1969 right now. Yes, sir. Katharine Hepburn, The Lion in Winter from Best Actress. My fault. I love you guys over Patreon. Actress in a supporting role, Ruth Gordon. We love her. We love her from Harold and Maude, but this one was for Rosemary's Baby. That was supporting role. So that's very, very good. A lot of directing went to Carol Reed, the director. Was he really the director from Third Man? Well, he's really the director of Oliver. That's the director. I think Carol Reed is a very underrated filmmaker. Foreign language film, went to War and Peace. I've never seen that. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. They won for War and Peace that year, foreign language film. And as far as the best picture, that went to Oliver. I have never seen Oliver, Anderson. That's so weird. So that's 1969 for the Oscars. Let's get to spoilers. I don't think there's anything for spoilers. The producers, what happened to the producers?
They failed.
They failed to fail. No, they didn't fail, Anderson. They were a hit. The product, but they failed. Yes, they failed. Their play, Springtime was a hit. The reason why I'm going rifling through the spoilers is because we all know what happens at the end.
Yeah.
Springtime for Hitler is a success. That success leads to their failure because their play wasn't a failure. The ending ends up them doing the same cockamamie thing.
And then there's a little, that's a little fun tag joke there at the very, very end, right? Where they end up to their old ways in a new location and a new surroundings. So that's the final little spoil. I guess since we're doing spoilers here, yeah. Why am I stopping you? And this is the spoilers discussion. I'm sorry, Greg. My apologies. You gave the wrong Academy Awards. Now I'm telling you not to spoil in the spoiler section.
No, but it's a tag. It's a tag for the spoilers, Anderson. It's a tag. But you're correct. You're correct. That's why it's really not even worth mentioning because it's they're
in jail doing the same thing. Selling like hundreds. But you know what bugged me? They only got to 100%. They didn't show them going over 100%. They sold, I think, 50% and then 50%.
Right.
I don't think they did like another.
They should have had one more beat with that. And as far as the Boston Strangler, it's just like
it's a great premise. Before we move on from the producers, it is a fantastic premise. A failed producer trying to fail on purpose and failing at failing. It's a great premise. It really is. It's just the type of comedy is not my comedy changes over the decades too. And I don't know if there is any timeless comedy that's not like save for like
Silent
slapstick,
film.
perhaps.
Yeah, or silent films, right?
Yeah,
Silent
like
films is
Buster
because
Keaton type stuff.
Charlie
Yeah.
Chaplin. Yeah. No, yeah. So
I
that's it.
don't
And then as far as the Boston Strangler,
like if your parents' comedy is going to be considered hokey by the next generation, right? Like
That's
that's
true.
that's the nature of comedy. Like
Yeah,
you
and
can't be laughing.
Hey, Anderson, unfortunately, the dark side of comedies, I'm sure the word it rhymes with maggot was used a lot in stand-up routines back in the 60s and 50s, right? I can bet you that. Yeah, a lot of very pejorative type of language was used back in the day, but it's not used anymore. Speaking of stuff that's not used anymore, Tony Curtis, he's passed away years ago. He has a very true to force performance at the end of the Boston Strangler. It's basically him doing a one-man show in that whole questionnaire. What is it? It's sort of a hospital ward situation, and he's being questioned by Henry Fonda. But the last several minutes basically has him in that room. Even though Henry Fonda is in the room, he's imagining himself speaking. And did you like that part where it's just?
I did. I didn't
Yeah.
like that they didn't get they were almost like doing a guinea pig test on the mom and the daughter. I wanted them to get them
That was
out of there
weird.
earlier. It was uncomfortable watching cops watch these damsels in distress almost die, or could be, be in harm's way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Tony Curtis really, really, acting without overacting. I thought he was very, very good.
And I don't think I can speak for you, Anderson. I don't know if Anderson and I are huge Tony Curtis enthusiasts.
I like him a lot.
Okay, I mean, experts as far as I
No.
just don't. I don't know many great Tony Curtis performances other than maybe Sweet Smell of Success. Obviously, biasly, we love Spartacus and this movie, but it's so amazing to me that
The Defiant ones, which has not aged gracefully, and a lot of people are upset, but I love the Defiant ones.
Oh, I still love the Defiant ones. Great pull, Anderson. But I think just based on those several films, I don't know if you agree with me. Great entertainer. I think he's an underrated actor. They don't give. Yeah. So
what's funny is every time Tony Curtis comes up, and I do a little research on whatever project he's in, I read about all the anti-Tony Curtis sentiment that was out there and the backlash. He was like, I think, named in like People magazine or not some big magazine at the time that this came out as like the most overpaid actor in Hollywood. I don't know if you ever heard Donald Trumbo's lashing out at him as far as Spartacus goes. I think
right. You mentioned, yeah, you did. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
But there's a commentary for Spartacus with Donald Trumbo, which is a really interesting watch. And when he gets to the Tony Curtis segment, I mean, he just goes off on how much he hates this man and how horrible he is and how worthless he is as an actor. It's bizarre. He's always worked for me from the time that I first saw Tony Curtis way back when. I don't despise him like so many people do. I don't know if he rubbed people the wrong way at the time, or I don't know what
he did.
What the deal is.
His carousing, and he left Janet Leigh, and just but his reputation preceded him, but the talent is still there.
I think it's good.
And before we go, Anderson, years ago during one of the Halloween press junkets, I asked Jamie Lee Curtis my question to her, because I ask these kind of questions. I go, Jamie, just wondering regarding your parents, Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis, do you ever felt that they were, even though they were popular, that they never got their due? And her answer, just paraphrasing, was she got a little bit animated. She said, "You're completely right. They never got the respect they deserved in the industry, even though they were successful." So she.
Well, what's she gonna say, Greg? Yeah, I think they got their due. I think if anything, they got too much due. That's
the good point. Good point. I was just trying to pat myself on my hump of a back there. So
Gregor, you can't talk to a humpback about your humpback. I got the humpback.
That's it, folks. We're not going to tape cinematics with Eric Holmes and Bruce Purkey. Anything further to say, Anderson?
In case I forget to do it on the next episode, we are moving on to 1975, Greg, for our next watch. 1975, and then we only have a couple more after that. One in the 40s and one in the 70s. So 1975. Give me your pick, Greg, sooner than later. Let's watch these 1975 movies. I love going back in time and watching these things, having an excuse to do so. It's great. So thank you very much for making that a reality, Patreon listeners.
Thank you guys so much. Yes, sir.
Until next time, Gregor.
Until next time. Love you, Anderson. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.